Hey guys, we are going to review distributive property today. So this is something that you guys should have all learned about when you were in probably fifth and sixth grade. So we're going to review it and we will extend it on as seventh graders. So when you glue your foldable in, you probably want to glue it close to the middle so that when you open, you're going to be writing on all three of these things. So make sure that you have where you can write. If you don't glue it in close, it's going to be harder to write on this one if it's hanging off your book. So just be careful there. All right, so let's go back to the front. Distributive property. Excuse me, distributive property. The difference that we have in middle school compared to elementary school is we need to make sure we pay attention to our positives and our negatives. So here, first of all, distributive property, I think of distributive property as we are distributing through our parentheses. Now, sometimes if these are both numbers, we can add first because we know that according to PEMDAS, you're supposed to do your parentheses first and then do outside the parentheses. But sometimes when we think back to combining like terms, we're not going to be able to combine these. So with this, we know we're going to distribute here and we're going to distribute here. And I just had these, when I made this, I just made them as variables just because I want you to realize that we can use these for any different numbers or any different variable. We know that this one, because there's no sign in the front, is going to be positive. We know that this one, because there's no sign in the front, it's going to be positive. And then we see that this one is positive because we have that positive sign in front of it. So here we're thinking about positive times a positive would give us a positive answer, positive AB. Remember, when they're side by side like that, that means we're multiplying. We would know here a positive times a positive is going to give us another positive. Okay, so this thing would be positive as well. So like I said, that's the big thing. And just so you don't get confused, this is like if I had a 3 and a 4, this would be 3 times 4. That's where this would be that over there. Okay, so for this one, once again, I know that there's no sign here, so that one's positive. I know that there's no sign here, so that's positive. And I see this in front of the C, so that's negative. So when I distribute, I'm going to distribute here, and I'm going to distribute there. A positive times a positive is going to give me a positive. And then a positive times a negative is going to give me a negative. So as a reminder, just going back to our multiplying integers, always think about this. We know that positives go down a diagonal. We have negatives that we fill in here. Remember, this is a negative times a negative is a positive. Negative times a positive is a negative. Positive times a negative is a negative. Okay, so this is just a reminder, and you can use this for anything. It doesn't just have to be numbers. All right, so let's look at these last two. This one has that negative in the front, so it's a negative. So remember, that goes with it. This one has no sign, so it's positive. We have a positive in front of this sign, or in front of this integer, so it's positive. So here we're going to multiply this. Negative times a positive is going to give me a negative. Negative times a positive is a negative. We're going to do it again. We have a negative times a positive. Negative times a positive is a negative. So this is also going to be negative. So we would have two negatives over there. All right, last one. We have this. It's our negative. We have this. It's a positive. We have this. It's a negative. So when we distribute, we do negative times a positive. Negative times a positive is a negative. And that's why we have that negative right there. And then we have negative times a negative. Negative times a negative is a positive. So we would have a positive AC there when we distribute that. So that's just kind of me reminding you what distributive property is and reminding you the positives and negatives. So let's go inside our foldable and work on some of these. So with this, what we're thinking about when we think about distributive property, we're thinking about what number should be distributed, okay? So we are going to look, we know we have a 3 here, and that 3 should be distributed, okay? We're going to distribute it here. When we distribute, we are multiplying that. So we would do 3 times 4, and that's going to be 12. So we would have a 12 here, okay? Well, this time we have that negative x. So we would do that 3 times a negative x, okay? So when you think about that, you would be thinking about it like this. There is always an invisible 1 in front of a variable if there's no coefficient. A coefficient is the number in front of the variable. So there's always a coefficient. If you don't see 1, like if it's not 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, 500, it's an invisible 1. So what we would do here, this would actually be 3 times negative 1x, okay? So we know we have a positive times a negative, and we can look back here if we need to. Positive times a negative, our answer is going to be negative. And then we would do 3 times 1, which is going to be 3, and then your x comes along with it, okay? So this distributed, when we distribute this here, it's going to change into 12 minus 3x, or a positive 12 and a negative 3x. You know, that's kind of the same, okay? We also look for if we need to combine like terms. So thinking back to our review from earlier, do we have like terms to combine? This does not have an x, this does have an x. So there is no like terms to combine. So for over here, we just put a line, okay? So let's look at this next one. So for the next one, we have, what number are we distributing? We are distributing this negative 6. So we'll distribute our negative 6, okay? So when we distribute it here, we are actually doing negative 6 times this positive 2x, okay? And if we do that, remember, negative times a positive is going to be a negative. 6 times 2 is 12, and then we have our x with it, okay? So the second one that we would do is we would do this negative 6 times a positive 6. So there we would do that negative 6 times a positive 6, and that's going to be a negative times a positive is a negative. 6 times 6 is 36. So when we distribute it, it will be negative 12x minus 36. And that would be your answer for that. All you do is distribute. Once again, we do not have like terms, so we don't do that part. All right, let's look at the next one. So you see now how when you distribute it, we are actually multiplying here and multiplying here. So let's look at the next one. Think about, what are we distributing this time? Now we have some other junk, some other terms, or what these called, or these are called. We have terms over here, but what are we distributing? We are distributing that 5, that positive 5, okay? So we're distributing this. When we distribute it, we are going to distribute and get, so 5 times a negative x is the first thing. We know that would be a negative 5x. And then we're going to multiply. We have a positive 4 here. So positive 5 times positive 4 would be positive 20. Now, we're finished with the parentheses, but we have to bring over the rest of the terms. So that would be a positive 2x and a negative 3. Now, we're going to go back to what we were talking about earlier about combining like terms. So we need to figure out our like terms. You do it the way you want to. I know that one way you can do it is you can circle it in different colors. You can put different shapes. But I have an x term here, and I have an x term here. Remember, the sign goes with the whole term. And I have a constant. Remember, that's the number without the variable here, and I have a constant here. So we need to combine those. So if I combine a negative 5x and a positive 2x, I'm going to get, so a negative 5 and a positive 2. Do we have more negatives or positives? We have no more negatives. And then 5 minus 2 would be 3. Make sure you keep that x with it. So negative 3x. Then I'm going to have a positive 20 and a negative 3. So when we combine those, we would have more positives. And then we do 20 minus 3, which is 17. And so that would be what we do with this one. All right. I want us to skip down really quick all the way down to this one down here, okay? So for this one, what number are we distributing? Remember, it's what is ever right in front of the parentheses. And this is where sometimes people have gotten tricked with this, because remember, the sign goes with that number. So this time we are distributing a negative 3. Okay, we're distributing a negative 3. So when we distribute it, we go here. We have that negative 4 there that we like to circle. And we go here. So, but this time, y'all, we have something in the front that does not get distributed. We're going to bring that over first. We have our 4x. It just comes over because it's extra term. But now we're going to do negative 3 times 6x. So negative times a positive is a negative. 3 times 6 is 18. And we have our x. Then we're going to do negative 3 times negative 4. Negative times a negative is a positive. 3 times 4 is 12. And after that, we have this positive 6. Okay, so we put that. Now, some of you guys will be able to just combine the stuff in your head. If you can't, circle them until you get used to it. But I'm going to show you how you can combine in your head. So I know I have an x term here. You could also list your terms, okay? And what I mean by that is I'll show you. So I have a 4x. I'm going to put my 4x right here. I have a positive 4x, okay? Then I have a negative 18x. Those are like terms. So I've got them grouped together. I'm going to have a positive 12. And I'm going to have a positive 6. And so those terms, and so I've used each of my terms. So those terms are grouped together, and then we can solve. So I know with my x terms, I have a negative 18 and a positive 4. So I have more negatives. So my answer is going to be negative. And then we do 18 minus 4, which you should be able to do in your head, which will be 14x. And then I have a positive 12 and a positive 6. Both those are positives. We just combine them and we'll have a positive 18. And that will be the answer to that. That would be the solution. So here's what we're going to do. You're done taking these notes. Tomorrow, we are going to work on the other 4 together to talk about, we're going to, just so we can kind of review it and talk about it together. And then we're going to practice these together. I mean, kind of individually, but together. So have a good day. And this is Distributive Property.